I found her sitting in our kitchen, counting money that shouldn't have existed, and every bill had my father's initials burned into the corner. The air was heavy with burnt toast and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Outside, the morning traffic swelled and faded, but inside, the world had narrowed to that image, her fingers gliding over the stacks like a pianist rehearsing a private recital. She didn't notice me at first, or maybe she did, and just didn't care. "I'm leaving," she said without looking up. "I've already taken what I need." The words didn't land like a shout. They were quiet, measured, but they detonated in my chest. I caught sight of a folded paper by the coffee maker, my name scrawled in her rushed handwriting. I stepped forward, the floor creaking under my weight. "What's this?" "Divorce papers, and an explanation," she said, sliding the envelope toward me with 2 fingers, as if it was contaminated. Her phone buzzed on the counter. The name that flashed, Elliot, wasn't one I recognized. She turned the screen over too quickly. I opened the envelope. The letter was short, a single paragraph about irreconcilable differences and her need for financial freedom. Attached, a printout from our joint account. The balance was 0. Even the savings account my father had helped me start in college was empty. My hand tightened around the paper until it crumpled. "You took everything," I said. She finally looked at me. Her eyes weren't angry or apologetic. They were flat. "No, I took what was mine, and maybe what should have been mine all along." A truck rumbled past outside. The sound seemed to push the walls inward. I glanced at the bills again, the ones with my father's faint initials, the mark he'd always told me was our sign. They shouldn't have been here. They should have been in the safe deposit box at the bank. Something cold slid into my spine. I didn't ask her how she got them. I didn't ask who Elliot was. Instead, I heard myself say, "When did it start?" She smiled, not kindly. "You'll figure it out. You're good at puzzles." Her footsteps faded down the hall. The front door opened, then closed. The apartment was suddenly too quiet. I stared at the money, the papers, the empty accounts printed in black ink. And I began to think about when it all began. That afternoon, I sat in my car 2 blocks from our building, engine off, just watching the windows. Her silhouette appeared once, a flicker behind the curtains, then vanished. She was moving quickly. Packing. I should have gone up there, demanded answers, but instead, I stayed in the driver's seat, feeling the steering wheel's grain under my palms, breathing through the smell of old coffee and vinyl. People passed by on the sidewalk, some glancing up at the building, some not. Life going on. Meanwhile, mine had splintered that morning, and the shards were still spinning in my head. I told myself I didn't care about the money, it was just money. But those bills in the kitchen. That was my father's mark. That meant she'd gotten into something I thought was untouchable. A memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. 3 months ago. Late evening. She'd come home flushed, her hair smelling faintly of cigarette smoke, though she never smoked. I'd asked where she'd been. She said networking dinner, kissed me quickly, then disappeared into the shower before I could ask more. I didn't think much of it then. Now every detail felt like a breadcrumb I'd ignored. The streetlight outside our building flickered, even though it was still daylight. I focused on it until my eyes ached. Then movement, the door opening. She stepped out, pulling a suitcase, phone pressed to her ear. A man emerged behind her. Not Elliot, at least not as I pictured him. Tall, dark jacket, baseball cap low. He didn't touch her, but their pace matched, like they'd walked together before. I stayed low in the seat, fingers curling tighter around the steering wheel. Her voice carried faintly, "Yes, almost done, just one more account to handle." They headed for the corner and a cab slowed to pick them up. The man opened the door for her. I caught her laughing at something he said. I could have followed them. But instead, I turned the key in the ignition and drove the opposite way. That night, the apartment was stripped of her presence. No shoes by the door, no jacket on the hook. The framed photo from our trip to Italy was gone. Only a square of dust on the shelf marked where it had been. In the bedroom, her side of the closet yawned empty. A faint scent of her perfume lingered in the air, expensive, sweet, cloying now. I sat on the bed, the divorce papers spread out beside me, the numbers from the account statement burned into my eyes. And then I saw it. A mistake. On the last page, where she detailed the withdrawals, the timestamp on one transfer didn't match the others. It was from 3 weeks earlier, the same day my father's lawyer had called me to confirm the location of sensitive assets. I remembered brushing him off, saying I'd get back to him. I never did. The next morning, I went to the bank. The safe deposit room smelled of metal and dust. My box was still there, but inside the main envelope of bills was gone. Only a single $1 bill remained, my father's initials carved faintly into the corner like a whisper. I stood there too long. The bank clerk eventually poked his head in. "Sir, are you all right?" I slipped the bill into my pocket. "Yeah, just taking stock." Back in my car, I turned the bill over between my fingers. She'd taken nearly everything from that box, but not this. Either she'd missed it or she'd left it on purpose. The thought twisted in my gut. Was it a warning or an invitation to chase her? My phone buzzed, a blocked number. I almost ignored it. When I answered, a man's voice said, "If you want to know where your wife's been keeping her other money, meet me tonight, alone." I stared at the bill in my hand. The weight of it, suddenly heavier than paper had any right to be. The address he gave me led to a diner on the outskirts of town. Not the kind of place you find by accident, half the neon letters burned out, parking lot cracked and sprouting weeds. Inside, the air smelled like fryer grease and old coffee. A waitress in a faded blue uniform poured me a cup without asking. He was already there in a corner booth, mid-40s, grey stubble, leather jacket that had seen better decades. He didn't smile when I sat down. "You don't know me," he said, "but I know your wife." I leaned back. "That's not much of a resume." He slid an envelope across the table, inside, grainy photos. My wife in a dim office, passing a small metal box to the man in the baseball cap. In another shot, she was counting bundles of cash at a desk that wasn't ours. "Where'd you get these?" I asked. "Let's just say she's been dipping her hands in more than one till. Work, side gigs, favors for people you don't want to owe." I kept my face still. "And why are you telling me?" He sipped his coffee. "Because she burned me too. You're not the only one she thinks is stupid." That night, I went home and laid everything on the kitchen table, the photos, the bank statements, the single marked dollar bill. I stared at them like puzzle pieces that refused to fit. She hadn't just stolen from me. She'd stolen from people dangerous enough to make her disappear if they wanted. That meant I wasn't just in a divorce, I was in a crossfire. I called Bennett, my father's old lawyer. He answered on the second ring. "Something's come up," I said, "and I need to know. If money was taken from the safe deposit box, is it part of marital property?" "Not if it was specifically gifted to you before the marriage," he said, which, if I remember correctly, it was. "Why?" I told him just enough to get his attention. He whistled low. "Then you've got leverage, strong leverage. We can freeze her accounts, block her access to anything in your name. But I'd need proof she took it." I looked at the dollar bill in my pocket. My father's initials stared back at me like a seal. Proof. The next day I tested the waters. I called her. No answer. I texted, "We need to talk. I might be willing to settle quietly." Her reply came 2 minutes later, "Meet me Friday. Same place as before. Same place as before." I didn't know what she meant, but I agreed. Bennett and I mapped it out. We'd let her talk, see if she'd admit to anything. If she did, we'd move fast. Restraining order, asset freeze, subpoena for her work records. He leaned over his desk, lowering his voice. "She thinks she's ahead. That's when people get sloppy. Let her believe it." That night, I sat in the dark. No TV, no music. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the low thud of my own pulse. I realized something. I wasn't shaking anymore. The confusion, the shock, the weight pressing me down since she walked out. It had shifted. I wasn't just the man she left. I was the man who knew she'd underestimated him. The thought settled into my bones like armor. When I finally went to bed, I placed the dollar bill on the nightstand, facing up. A marker. A reminder. Friday couldn't come fast enough. Friday came with rain, the kind that turned the streets into mirrors. I parked a block away from the address she'd texted. An upscale cafe, all glass walls and warm lighting. I could see her inside, already seated, a latte steaming in front of her. I stepped in, shook the water from my jacket and approached. She looked up, smiled, not warmly, but like someone rehearsing politeness for an audience. "You came," she said. "You asked." She gestured to the empty chair. I sat, feeling the heat of the coffee machine behind the counter and the cold of her eyes across from me. "So, you're ready to settle?" she asked, leaning forward. "I'm ready to listen," I said. She stirred her drink, slow, deliberate. 50% of the house, the car, and we don't talk about the other money. The words hit harder than I expected. "The other money?" I asked, testing her. She didn't blink. "Don't play dumb. You know it's gone. What you don't know is, you won't get it back." My jaw tightened. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact," she said, sipping her latte, "and if you push, you'll lose more than cash." I glanced toward the glass wall and froze. The man in the baseball cap was outside, leaning against a lamppost, watching us. I didn't wait for dessert. I walked out, not looking at him, and kept moving until I reached my car. But when I opened the door, a voice behind me said, "Careful. Some debts aren't worth collecting." I turned. He was closer now, rain dripping from his cap. "She's in deeper than you know," he said. "Walk away before you join her." "I'm not walking away," I said. He smiled without humor. "Then I'll see you sooner than you think." That night Bennett called. "Bad news," he said. "Her lawyer filed a motion to freeze your business account. Claims you moved marital funds without disclosure." I gripped the phone tighter. "That's a lie." "Doesn't matter. Until we prove it, the account stays locked." "You've got bills coming due, right?" I stared at the rain on the window, the streetlight bleeding gold into the water. "Yeah, I've got bills." The next week was a slow collapse. Vendors called. Employees asked about late paychecks. I covered what I could from personal savings, but the numbers didn't add up. One night I stayed in the office until dawn, staring at spreadsheets that no longer meant anything. The rain had stopped, but inside me it hadn't. At 4 a.m., I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face. The mirror was cracked. I hadn't noticed before. My reflection was split in two, each half looking at the other with suspicion. I gripped the sink until my knuckles whitened. "She's winning," I whispered to no one. And for the first time, I believed it. The following day, I drove past her office. Through the glass, I saw her laughing with co-workers, her hand brushing the arm of a man who wasn't the one in the photos. She looked untouched, like my life falling apart had nothing to do with her. I sat there until my coffee went cold, until my chest ached from holding still. That night, I dreamed of the safe deposit box. I opened it, but instead of money, it was filled with black water, rising fast, spilling over my hands. No matter how much I tried to scoop it out, it kept coming. When I woke, the dollar bill was still on my nightstand, but it felt lighter, as if it too was giving up. The call came just after noon. A woman's voice, low and cautious. "You don't know me, but I work with your wife. We need to meet." I almost hung up. Then she said, "It's about what she's been doing here, and it's not just you she's stealing from." An hour later, I was in the back booth of a Mexican restaurant near the river. The woman slid into the seat across from me, pulling her scarf tighter around her neck. "She's been moving money out of client accounts," she said. "Small amounts, enough that most wouldn't notice right away. But it's adding up. And the man she's been meeting, he's not her boyfriend, he's her fixer." I didn't speak, I just let her keep talking. "They're laundering it, through a shell company. If you can prove that, you'll have more than divorce leverage. You'll have a federal case." Her eyes darted toward the window. I shouldn't be here. But I saw what she did to one of our older clients, a veteran, barely enough to live on, and I couldn't let it slide. She slid a flash drive across the table, everything I could copy without getting caught. Back in my office, I plugged it in. The files were messy, but I could see the pattern. Account numbers, irregular withdrawals, deposits into a corporate account under a name I didn't recognize. I called Bennett. "If this is real, we're not talking civil court anymore." He exhaled slowly. "This is bigger than us. We bring this to the feds and you're out of her shadow for good." "But it puts me in theirs," I said. "Better their light than her darkness," he said. That night I spread the papers and files across my desk. The dollar bill lay in the center, a compass point. My father's initials stared up at me, and for the first time since this began, I saw it differently. It wasn't just a mark of ownership, it was a reminder of how he played the long game. I wasn't going to burn her life down in a fit of rage. I was going to dismantle it, piece by piece, until she couldn't touch mine again. The next day, I made my first quiet move. I went to the bank, not to check my own accounts, but hers. Through a contact I still had, a manager who'd worked with my father, I confirmed what the files hinted at. Multiple transfers to an out-of-state bank, all routed through the same shell company. I didn't freeze them yet, let her keep thinking the machine was running smoothly. The higher she climbed, the harder the fall. That night, I called the woman from the restaurant. "We're going to need more than transaction records. We need proof she knew exactly what she was doing." "I can get you recordings," she said, "but if she catches me—" "She won't," I said, "because she's not looking at you. She's looking at me." For the first time in weeks, I felt something steady in my chest. Not hope, not relief, just focus. I wasn't just a husband she'd betrayed. I was now the one thing she couldn't afford to have, a man with proof, patience, and nothing left to lose. The goal wasn't revenge anymore, it was exposure, and if that meant pulling in every ally, every contact, every ounce of leverage my father had left me, then so be it. Because this wasn't just my marriage collapsing. It was a structure of lies and theft, and I was about to be the one holding the demolition switch. 2 weeks later, I walked into a charity gala like I belonged there. The ballroom glittered, chandeliers dripping with light, champagne flutes catching the gold. Every table had a corporate sponsor's name, every corner a security camera. Bennett was at my side, tuxedo crisp, expression unreadable. Across the room I spotted her. My wife, emerald dress, hair curled, laughing with a cluster of donors like she'd never stolen a cent in her life. "Remember," Bennett murmured, "tonight's not about confrontation. It's about gathering the last pieces." I nodded, eyes never leaving her. My ally from her office, her name was Carla, arrived 10 minutes later. She wore black, simple, almost blending into the waitstaff, and carried a small clutch. Inside it, a voice recorder. "She's expecting a pitch meeting about a fake investment," Carla whispered as we passed near the bar. "The man she's meeting thinks he's roping her into another laundering channel. He doesn't know he's being recorded either." We positioned ourselves just close enough to see, but far enough to be background. Her contact arrived, not the man in the baseball cap this time, but someone older, slicker. They leaned in over cocktails. Carla adjusted her clutch so the recorder caught every word. "2 accounts offshore," he was saying. "You moved the first sum through your shell, then we—" She interrupted. "Same cut as before. I don't take less for a bigger risk." Bennett's hand tightened on my arm. "Got her," his look said. Later, as the band started up, I stepped into her path. "Enjoying yourself?" I asked. She didn't flinch. "You shouldn't be here." "And yet," I said, "I am." Her smile was slow and dangerous. "You think you're scaring me?" I leaned in, close enough for only her to hear. "Not yet." Then I walked away, leaving her watching me, just a flicker of something sharp in her eyes. Not fear, but awareness. She knew now there was a game she wasn't fully controlling. The next day, Carla dropped the audio file into my inbox. I played it 3 times. Her voice was steady, confident, naming account numbers and percentages without hesitation. Bennett called the moment I sent it to him. "This is the nail in the coffin. We can take it to the feds this week." But I had a better idea. "Not yet," I said. "Let's make sure when it drops, she's surrounded by witnesses." We staged the next move at her office holiday party, a public event, cameras, clients, and partners all present. I walked in with Carla and Bennett, all of us blending into the crowd. We made small talk, sipped wine, and waited until she was in the center of the room, smiling for a photo. That's when Bennett handed me a thin envelope. "Everything ready?" I nodded. Inside were copies of the transaction logs, stills from the gala, and a short transcript of the recording. I crossed the room. "These are for you," I said, handing her the envelope. She opened it, scanning the first page. The color drained just enough for me to notice. "This is your last chance to walk away quietly," I said. She didn't answer, just tore the papers in half, but her hand shook, and I knew then the trap was set and she was the one caught in it. The courthouse lobby buzzed like a hive, lawyers in sharp suits, clients clutching folders, the echo of footsteps bouncing off marble. She stood near the security checkpoint, flanked by her attorney. The emerald dress was gone. Today she wore a navy suit, hair pulled tight, expression carved from stone. I walked past her without slowing. Bennett was already waiting by the metal detector, a stack of sealed folders in his hands. "Press is here," he murmured. "They're covering an unrelated case upstairs, but they'll see this when it happens." I glanced over my shoulder. A local news crew was setting up near the elevators. Perfect. In the courtroom, the air was colder, thinner. The judge entered, the bailiff called for order, and the lawyers began their dance. Her attorney moved first, calm, smooth, arguing that my claims were exaggerated, that the funds were part of shared assets. Then Bennett rose. His voice was steady as he placed the flash drive on the evidence table. Audio recording, time-stamped, clearly identifying Mrs. Hart as knowingly laundering funds through a shell company for personal gain. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." The audio filled the room, her voice unmistakable. Same cut as before. "I don't take less for a bigger risk." A ripple went through the spectators' benches. She shifted in her seat, glancing toward the press section. Cameras were rolling now. Her attorney tried to object, but Bennett was ready with the transaction logs, each matched to a date and account number she'd referenced in the recording. By the time the last page was entered, her calm veneer had cracked. She whispered furiously to her lawyer. He didn't look back at her. The judge leaned forward. "Given the evidence presented, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. This court will also grant the motion to freeze all accounts in Mrs. Hart's name, effective immediately." Gasps, the sound of pen scratching as reporters took it all down. Outside, the lobby was a storm. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed. She pushed through them, her attorney shielding her path, but the man in the baseball cap was there, leaning against a pillar, watching her leave. "Looks like the tide's turned," he said to me as she disappeared into the street. I didn't answer. I just stepped past him toward the doors. On the courthouse steps, Bennett caught up. "We could make a statement," he said, nodding to the cameras. "No," I said. "Let her be the only one explaining herself." Down the block, I saw her again, now alone, fumbling with her phone. A photographer caught her mid-step, her face twisted, eyes half closed. That would be tomorrow's headline photo. For a moment, I thought she'd look my way. She didn't. I walked until the courthouse was just another building behind me. The dollar bill was still in my pocket, edges worn now from weeks of handling. The victory felt strange, not loud, not sweet, just done. A block later, I turned into a side street and kept walking, leaving the sound of the city behind. Somewhere up ahead, I knew there was work to do, rebuilding, starting over. But that wasn't for today. Today was for disappearing from her story completely. The rain had started again by nightfall, soft at first, then steady enough to blur the streetlights into long streaks of gold. I stood in the doorway of my father's old workshop, the scent of oil and cedar still clinging to the walls. The machines were covered, the benches cleared, except for one spot in the center. I took the dollar bill from my pocket, smoothed its creases, and set it down on the wood. The initials caught the light for a moment before the shadow reclaimed them. Outside, a siren wailed, then faded into the distance. Somewhere in the city, her world was collapsing. Court orders, frozen accounts, people she'd once called friends turning away. Here, it was just quiet. I turned off the light and stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind me. The lock clicked, final and sharp. The rain soaked through my jacket as I walked to the street, but I didn't hurry. Each step felt like it was carrying me further from something I no longer needed to name. At the corner, I paused, glanced once over my shoulder at the darkened workshop, and kept walking into the rain.